You have shared very openly about living with dyslexia and how it has deeply shaped your childhood and a sense of self.
So I was diagnosed, and it is something that is diagnosed, at the age of about 6 or 7. My parents were told that you have to deal with the reality of your daughter's situation. It was considered a death sentence. My dad and I had a mantra, and he taught me this as a little girl. You know, we're 6, 7, 8 years old. We had this mantra that prove them wrong, Ellen, prove them wrong. You know you can prove them wrong.
I know most of them know what dyslexia is, but can you simplify what it is like?
There's a lot of misperception out there. Probably the biggest one is that it involves having a low IQ. We are known to be very creative thinkers, very high level thinking. And what's interesting is that British intelligence services actually seeks out to recruit people who are documented as dyslexic because of their unique abilities.
Now, talking about your memoir, Disempowered, first of all, I want to understand what was the motivation about putting this as a name, Disempowered.
You know, it really encapsulates it because I was disempowered as a child. And then as an adult, I became empowered and I took that back. So it really fit the book perfectly.
I have seen a lot of people, they don't even realize they are going through certain patterns and they're not able to realize those patterns. So, are there any methods that helped you to find out?
You know, I think this is one of the advantages of being dyslexic is we're very good at seeing patterns.
Tell us what legacy you want to stay, like people should take away with when you're gone, let's say from planet Earth.
I think the biggest thing to understand is
Hello, welcome to Inward Strides with Savni. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you.
So, I would love to begin at the very start of how it all started. Like, you have shared very openly about living with dyslexia and how it has deeply shaped your childhood and a sense of self. But I would love to understand what it was like when you came across this word and when you came to know you had it. Please take us through your journey.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I was diagnosed, and it is something that is diagnosed at the age of about 6 or 7. And I originally was diagnosed as being ambidextrous, which is interesting in itself.
What is?
Um, Ambidextrous is when you're neither left-handed or right-handed,
Oh, I see.
so you can switch back and forth. And because of that diagnosis, there was further testing done, and it was determined that I was dyslexic. Unfortunately, when I went through the school system, and this was in the 70s, um, and I lived in an affluent community which had excellent schools, it was considered a death sentence. My parents were told that when I was diagnosed, so I'm 6 or 7 years old, and the school system just wrote me off. And they said, you know, you have to deal with the reality of your daughter's situation. She might finish high school, but she's not going to go on to college. You need to focus on finding her a husband who will take care of her. And there's just no hope. And my parents were furious, absolutely furious. And they just did not accept that. And they supported me every way that they could. But the problem was is that I was facing this on a daily basis. You know, most people who are dyslexic have actually a higher than average IQ. So it's looked at as a disability, and legally it is a disability. However, we have strengths that normies don't have. So, but that's a whole another discussion in itself. But to answer your question, it's been, you know, going into the classroom every day. The classroom was a hostile, dangerous environment for me because the level of frustration that I was dealing with and then being put down by administrators and teachers who just wrote me off. Now, I did have some great teachers, and I'm grateful for them. And I was always behind, always trying to catch up, and it was maddening. And I always had to work twice as hard or 3 times as hard as my classmates. And then I was removed from the classroom for special education, for individualized help. And that just, kind of made me, I was ostracized at that point and bullied. So when I say the classroom was a dangerous and hostile environment, I'm not kidding. It really was. Um, and I was traumatized by that. I had no self esteem. I joke and say I didn't have low self esteem, I had no self esteem because it just wasn't allowed. I was written off, and that was that. And I just didn't accept that. And I tried my hardest to fight back, and I did. And I did go on to college, and I even went and got a master's degree and then wrote a book. So, the whole system was against me. And it was very, very difficult. I didn't understand for a long time how traumatized I was and how much it had affected, like you said, my sense of self and my self-worth.
So, what gave you strength at that time to keep going when school and, let's say, society didn't always make space for how you learned?
Sure. Well, I think the most important thing was I had the absolute support of my parents. And my dad and I had a mantra, and he taught me this as a little girl. We're 6, 7, 8 years old. We had this mantra that prove them wrong, Ellen, prove them wrong. You can prove them wrong. And another thing he was teaching me about was micro goals. My dad was a veteran, and he understood that persevering through things took hard work and commitment. And he used to teach me just one test question at a time, Ellen. Just don't get overwhelmed, just one question at a time. And then as I grew up, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more in depth, they put me into activities that would help to challenge me, but also help me to grow and learn how to persevere. And then, because I had their support, I just wasn't going to give in. Even as a little girl, I got angry and said, you know what? I'm not going to give in. I'm going to fight back. And every day was a battle.
Wow, that's a lot of resilience, and I loved what your dad said. So thank you for sharing that. Um, So, like for our audience, like I know most of them know what dyslexia is, but can you simplify what it is? Like what, because there might be like I was going through some messages and comments on dyslexia, and people have so much misinformation. So I would love
Right.
for you to help them understand what it is.
Sure. And thank you for the opportunity to share that. And I can only share my perspective and my
Yes.
experience. And you're right, there's a lot of misperception out there. Probably the biggest one is that it involves having a low IQ. And nothing could be further from the truth. There's also it's often equated with laziness. We're not working hard enough. And anybody who knows me knows that that is absolutely not the case. um, for me, I'll back up a little bit. The science is still evolving. We don't understand it. We don't really know much about the brain itself. Um, the best way I can describe it is, again, through my experience. And basically, I'm a nonlinear visual thinker. So that's something to keep in mind. So I have a theory. And by the way, Einstein was dyslexic.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think anybody thinks he had an intellectual disability. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. But even if in his autobiography, whatever I have read about him, it feels like in his childhood he had suffered a lot.
Yes, he did. He was a late talker.
Mm,
And one of the things that he talks a lot about is imagination and the ability to visualize and how important that is. And because we're visual thinkers, and I think in pictures, I don't think in words.
mm,
So there's a translation that has to happen there. And I think when you're born as a visual thinker, it takes time to learn language because it's not how we're oriented. We're oriented towards vision and pictures. And I think that's part of the delay. But then as adults, when we do learn, and there is, neuroplasticity going on in our brains, we still retain that ability to visually think in pictures. I think that's probably the best description. We are known to be very creative thinkers, very high level thinking. We see interconnectedness and gist that most people miss. The British intelligence services, now the UK is really the most, and the Commonwealth countries are really the most advanced in understanding dyslexia, and they strive to understand it. And what's interesting is that British intelligence services actually seeks out to recruit people who are documented as dyslexic because of their unique abilities. Very interesting. So the
Okay.
world is starting to shift a little bit, and they're starting to see that we really do have great talents that linear thinkers don't necessarily have.
And what you said about pictures, it made me realize that because of that creative aspect of visually aligning and visually seeing first and then the words come up, even the problem solving must be very effective, right? Like, because people who want to solve the problems, first thing is told to them, like, visualize things or stuff
Right.
like that. And people struggle with that, but you have that ability. That's actually a gift.
It is.
um, yeah, so awesome. Thank you so much for making it so simple to understand for the audience in your own perspective, what you have lived with, and what you understand about it. So, of course, now in this all this process, emotionally, mentally, physically, it must have been a little bit tougher on you sometimes. So how was it? Were you survive? Were there years where you were just surviving, or
Mhm.
um, you had not accepted yourself because of the bullying or stuff? Like, how was it in the journey? Were there moments like this?
It was daily. I was battling through test questions, through learning to read, and then having bullies, hovering around me. It was traumatic, and I just kept going. I didn't really, I didn't know anything else. Um, I didn't have any other experience to compare it to because I was a child. So it was really the only thing I knew, and I just wasn't gonna give in.
And I'm sure you must have moments of burnout as well
Hmm.
in your life. And with the burnout, like, as now you help other people with it, I would love you if you can elaborate of what exactly is burnout and what are the signs that, like, you should not ignore or something like that.
Right. I think exhaustion is probably the best one, but it's not just physical exhaustion; it is mental exhaustion. One of the things that I learned early in childhood was to pace myself and to give myself breaks and give myself the space and the time. Now, because of the way we have summer breaks here in the U.S., that was really my saving grace, was having summer vacations and having them in a wonderful place. I grew up. My parents had a summer home on Fire Island, which is along the south shore of Long Island, and it is a beautiful, beautiful place. So it was all day on the beach, running around, covered in sand, soaking wet, in a bathing suit.
Wow.
So I had that reprieve. But it's a really good point. Especially moving into college. When I did go away to college, um, I've learned by then. I had learned how to really manage my time really well because I needed more time to study and to write papers. It was just something I had learned along the way, and I always gave myself the space to take breaks. Um, I went to college in northern Vermont, and I'm a big skier, hence the reason why I live here in Colorado. So that was my reprieve. That was my mental downtime. And, season pass, the mountain was very close by. So I'd ski 3 to 4 days a week. And that was my break time. And then a lot of times I'd have classes at night, and I would go from the mountain and the ski slopes, still in my ski pants, and go right to class. So if you were smart about it, you could manage your time really well. And that's something I've gotten really good at. So that's been
And
really helpful.
well, and I also learned that you are a master in scuba. Tell us about that.
I'm a very experienced scuba diver. I actually got certified at 17. My father, another one of the activities my father encouraged me to do. He never I just want to be clear, he never like forced me into something. It was always things that I just loved to do. And when he asked me if I wanted to get certified to dive, I nearly jumped out of my own skin. I was so excited. And it was very rare. You're talking 1987. It was very uncommon for people who are that young to get certified. And in fact, I was a minor, so my mom had to sign the paperwork. Um, and since then, over the years, I don't dive now because I live in Colorado, and but I've logged over 150 dives. I've done, and I wish I had any scuba divers out there. Keep a log. Don't stop keeping a log, because I probably have about 300 dives under my belt at this point.
Wow,
Yeah.
300.
So, and I'm a advanced diver, advanced certified. I'm a dry suit diver because I did a lot of diving in New England, in Maine, and New Hampshire, in Massachusetts, and that water is very, very cold. So a dry suit is really the only way to be comfortable. And that's a whole nother dynamic because of the buoyancy of the dry suit, and you have to have some skills and techniques to really be safe. Um, I've dove in the Keys and the Grand Caymans. So I've done some really fun stuff, some shipwrecks and things like that. I even managed to get myself bit by a stingray in Stingray City in Grand Cayman.
Oh no.
It latched onto my arm when I was trying to feed it. So yeah, it was a little messy, but it's a funny story now.
How was it in the Keys? What was your experience?
It was beautiful. The Keys are just spectacular, and to have access, to have that in our country is just such a gift. And so much of it is protected. Um, but the coral reefs and just the different marine life are just spectacular. But actually, one of the greatest dives I did was in Maine.
Mm.
And this is in my book. And it's almost difficult to describe. So I was just finishing up my advanced certification, which included a night dive with an instructor. And we would do some underwater navigation skills. And we were getting in the water just as the sun was going down. Now, I had done many night dives, so this was not anything scary for me or unusual. It was just a formality. We had to do it in order to check that box, kind of thing. And we went out went out and did our exercise. We were in Maine, and it was like early April, I think. So again, in dry suit, because that water is about 45 degrees. Yeah, it's
Oh,
cold. It is very cold. And we finished our practice, what we were practicing, and then we were coming back in, and we got engulfed in this school of baby fish. They were about this big, and there were thousands of them, and they were a silver color, and they were reflecting our dive lights, and we were completely surrounded by them. And I reached out, and I couldn't quite touch them, or they would bounce off my cheeks. I mean, it was just, we were completely surrounded by these silver reflective fish, and it was dense. I mean, they were like right on top of each other. And we just stopped and just had, just kind of took in this incredible experience of these fish just engulfing us. And it lasted maybe 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden they were gone. And we swam back, and we were just really close to the rocks where we were about to get out. And we got out of the water, and I looked at my instructor and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe that just happened." And he said, "I've been diving all of my life, and I've never had an experience like that." So what we think it was a school of juvenile fish, maybe sardines, maybe baby bluefish. We're not really sure. But in the spring, they tend to run up the coast in these large schools. And we just got caught in the middle of one of those schools of fish. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. It was incredible.
It sounds very magical and electrifying at the same time.
It
So,
was. It was beautiful.
now talking about your memoir, Disempowered, first of all, I want to understand what was the motivation about like putting this as a name, Disempowered.
It's so funny. My friend, my one of my best friends, came up with that title. I was really struggling. The book was almost written. I was struggling, like, what? How do I encapsulate? What's a good title? And my friend Sarah and I had been skiing at Vale, and afterwards we were done for the day, and we went to Garfinkel's to have a drink. And her partner Ronnie was wanted to watch a college basketball game. So it's a great little place in Vale to go. So we were talking. He's watching the game, and I start reading her this list of different title ideas, and she's like, "No, no, no." And I got through the list, and she said, "Well, how about disempowered with the DIS crossed out?" And I just looked at her and said, "Oh my God, that's it."
Was
it,
when I
it
read it, I was like, this is such a amazing name, like crossed out thing, especially. I was like,
yeah,
wow.
so I have to give her credit for that. But it really encapsulates it, because I was disempowered as a child, and then as an adult, I became empowered, and I took that back. And one of the things that I'm clear on is one of my purposes in life is to help people become empowered. So it
Yeah,
really fit the book perfectly.
yeah. And I was reading about escaping abuse and feeling powerless, which you have shared in the book.
Yes.
Um, how did you move from that, like feeling powerless place, to recognizing your voice and what you want to do and being in power again?
It took a long time. And any of your listeners or viewers, you know, it took a good 10 years. I want people to know that it takes time to heal. And I asked for help. I knew I was in trouble. I was driving through stop signs and red lights. I was so completely traumatized. I couldn't problem solve. I couldn't think through things. And I knew if I didn't get help, I was not going to be able to move forward. And I was afraid of repeating the same mistakes, because I could see the pattern. I could look back and see this pattern of how I got to this place, the low self esteem, the low self worth. So I went to work, and I looked at my healing from very different perspectives. I looked at my healing from a physical aspect, not just a mental health aspect. And I worked with EMDR specialists. I still work with an EMDR specialist. I have done acupuncture, acupressure. I even went and started doing CrossFit because my body needed to heal. Not just and I was out of shape. And I also think that when we're traumatized, we get very disconnected from our own physicality. An intense workout like CrossFit, you get reconnected really quick.
Oh,
Yeah. When you do intense workouts, you feel your body. And that was really important. I've also worked with a practitioner who, Dr. Bradley Nelson's practitioners, has a form of therapy called the body code. And that's about releasing trauma that's trapped in our bodies,
mm.
in our physical body, and it is incredibly effective. But I think the most important thing that I've done is I have a consistent breath practice. And one of the coaches in the training programs I have been a part of for almost 10 years now is Commander Mark Devine. He's in San Diego, and he's a retired Navy SEAL, and he has a training program for civilians. And you can go and train with him. And he teaches a lot of different yoga practices, breath practices. And the most important thing, and this is what I've learned from him, is to have a consistent breath practice. That alone is a game changer because that can bleed off a lot of anxiety.
So you, sorry,
No, that's okay. So I just started to put all these different healing modalities into practice. And then I moved at some point, the healing process. I don't know if it's ever complete. I think there's always things to dig up. It starts to become, it almost transmutes into self discovery. And you start to learn about who you are as a human being. And that's when things get really exciting. And that's when you really move into being empowered.
okay, you have shared so many good things. So I will first circle back to the patterns. You shared that
Mm.
you were able to find the patterns, and I have seen a lot of people, they don't even realize they are going through certain patterns and they're not able to realize those patterns. So are there any methods that helped you to find out, um like to find out what patterns you were going through in
Right.
your life?
Well, I think this is one of the advantages of being dyslexic is we're very good at seeing patterns.
Hmm.
I knew when I got away from my ex-husband that I had to take a long, hard look at myself because I needed to figure out what those patterns were. So it was a very conscious decision. So that's one piece of it. And also I was willing to do it. A lot of people aren't willing. I felt that if I continued on the path that I was in, that I might not survive, because I had had two stalkers, I'd had ugly boyfriends, and then this abusive marriage. I knew I needed to break that pattern, and my life might depend on it. In our country, every day, three women and one man are murdered in intimate partner relationships. And I wasn't willing to become a statistic. Just wasn't willing to do it. So, a lot of talk therapy with a credentialed therapist, um, and the EMDR that helps me to see the path, just all of that work. And then also the breath work, time and silence, meditation. These things are critical when you sit and you silence your brain and get off of social media, for example. You create a space where things can come up and you can have realizations. Say, oh, now I see that. So time and silence and meditation, breath work are mission critical. They are the simplest tools out there and they don't cost anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing I'm hearing from you is you said no to a lot of things. And
Yes.
initially, maybe you might have had a guilt initially, but then I have listened to your lot of podcasts and I realized that after a while there was no guilt. So
Right.
I would love to understand that process because there are so many people out there. Even for me, I can say that it was very challenging for me to say no a lot of times before. I had to learn that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to understand from you how was it for you, because you had to say no to a lot of things and come rise into your power.
You're right. And it's a process. It takes practice. One of the things that one of the exercises I did with one of my coaches, and also this is what we do in the Unbeatable Mind program with Mark Divine, is we look at our three P's. And our three P's are our purpose, our principles, and our passion. And once you get clear on what those are, that's a big help in saying no and then yes to the things that align with those three P's. And then it's about self-esteem. And again, it's a process, it takes time. And when you are in conviction of your principles, it's a lot easier to say no because those things, they don't align with your principles. So that's really the first step. And again, it's practice, it takes time, and you get I got better at it over time. And what's really interesting is I am crystal clear in my boundaries, in my standards, and my principles. And they are not negotiable under any circumstances. And I have cut people out of my life because I just cannot allow them if they constantly disrespect my boundaries and try and push them. And I've had to end relationships. And now that I have done that, I am naturally attracting these phenomenal people into my life. The friends that I have are absolutely amazing and I love them. And they keep me grounded.
Yeah, and it's so important to have people around you who with whom you feel grounded. That's a very important thing. And another thing you touched upon is with the three P's that you shared. It also helps with the boundaries and people pleasing. But
Yes.
then the thought came to my mind is a lot of people don't understand the first P itself. Then comes the principles and the third P, but purpose. Um, so what's your take on that? Because like like even for me, the purpose came very naturally. I understood what is my purpose over the period of time when I started asking questions.
Hmm.
I was open and, I accepted myself as I am. But I've seen people struggling and they keep asking me, oh, how did you find your purpose? And I'm like, I was not finding my purpose. I just accepted it when it came to me. But what's your take on it? Uh,
I agree with you. And one of the things as a coach, I encourage people to do is to start with your passions because those
mm,
are a little bit easier to see. What gets you excited?
mm,
What matters to you? What is important to you? Not what other people tell you should be important to you. Again, we go back to that breath work and that time in silence, looking into our hearts and seeing what we're really passionate about. And then we could move into principles and what you stand for, what you will tolerate, what you will not tolerate. And I think for women, it's in our society, it's a little bit harder because we are taught to be people pleasers. So we definitely have the gender piece of that to look at as well.
mm,
You know, I'm not I'm not a mom. I did not get the opportunity to do that, but I'm also very clear that that just was not my path. And I grew up with that, oh, you're going to get married and have kids, that whole expectation that's imposed on us. But it never occurred to me to even ask if that was my path. And now I'm clear that it was not my path. And I think to your point, when we start to get to, we talk about passion, principles, and then when we get to purpose, we tend to look at that last because those other two things can help to reveal that. Just like you said, it's often revealed, not necessarily decided.
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you for coming back to that circle, like how done. And another thing, what you said, I couldn't agree more about that. Like how women are imposed. Like I'm right now at the age that, like I went through a very, like I had many chronic diseases at a very young age, and
Oh,
people
sorry.
didn't. I'm actually grateful that I had all of that because of that I learned so much, and now
Mhm.
I'm to help people to heal themselves. So it was like revelation for me, like what I'm passionate about. But I had to go through it to understand.
Right.
Um, but on the same, like people know that I went through that and all of that. Now I'm completely healthy, happy, and people suddenly ask me, "Oh, like, do you have kids?" When I say no, I don't, without asking, like thinking anything, they would just say, oh, is it because you had those diseases and now you have any problems? I'm like, first of all, do you know, like, why? Like, no one cares about what you believe in, or
Right.
they just come to the conclusion that, oh, you don't have a child, that means you have some problems, or they will relate to something in the past. um So what you said, I completely agree that like when you want to do something out of the box or something which it's not a normal around, uh,
Hmm. Yeah,
uh, it's taken in a very different way, but then it's the time that you reclaim the power and don't give power to anyone else to decide um, what matters to you. So thank you for bringing that up.
absolutely. Yeah, anytime we step out of the norms, we risk being ostracized, criticized, or looked down on, or there must be something wrong with you. Um,
Yes.
that's very common, and it's unfortunate. But being able to really stand in your truth and know who you are and be completely comfortable with that, then you are empowered, and you don't apologize. I hear women say things like this all the time. I'm not going to allow you to do that. I'm sorry. Or I'm sorry, I won't, that's not going to work for me. No, there's no sorry. You have no reason to apologize. Just, you don't accept that. And it's not coming from a place of anger. It's coming from a place of truth and self truth and self esteem. No, I just won't accept that. That doesn't work for me. That's empowerment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, you said it so beautifully. Thank you for making it so simple to understand.
Thanks.
And now your work now integrates elite coaching, trauma work, and somatic practice.
Mhm.
How all these three came, like how did you decided to be in these three areas? And I think there is more to it as well, as I was reading. And how do you balance the pragmatic and physical pieces with emotional and spiritual ones?
Um, well, I think the first part of your question is this is actually the training model that I was taught. So, this is Mark Devine's Unbeatable Mind program. It's based on what's called the Five Mountain Plan. And the Five Mountain Plan is that you're always working on the different parts of yourself. And we have the physical part of ourselves, because we are a physical being and our brain is physical. We have the mental part of ourselves, the emotional part. Then we also have a thing called intuition. And intuition, when we develop that, is very helpful for us to discover our purpose and, working on that piece of it, because that comes from within. And our intuition comes from within. And then the fifth mountain is what Mark calls kokoro, or it's the merging of the heart and the mind. It can be a faith, it can be a world centric passion. We would say that somebody who's really empowered in serving the world is living the Kokoro mindset. So somebody like Gandhi. So this is very, very high level. But he mastered living in the Kokoro mindset. It's a Japanese word. And when you work on all those different parts of yourself, they actually support each other. For example, if you're working on your physical health, you're going to be much more, your head's going to be clear. You're going to feel better. You're going to breathe better, oxygenating that brain better. So you can help with the emotional side of things also. So they all kind of interconnect and support each other.
Oh, that is great connection. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because um, this is always a question. Like I have went through all those therapies and I honestly loved it, but this was the most asked question in some of the communities. So I was like, okay, let me bring that up and ask the
Sure.
expert like you, what was your take on it? Now we are at the end of our podcast. So I would like you to like tell us what legacy you want to stay, like people should take away with when you're gone, let's say from planet
Sure.
Earth.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I think The biggest thing to understand is, and this will be the theme of my next book, is moving from survivor to thriver. And a lot of people survive something horrific, traumatic, but you can heal. Not only can you heal, but you can empower yourself. You can completely reinvent yourself, and you can create the life that you want. But it takes commitment. It takes time, and you're not going to do it alone. We're not meant to do it alone. We have that lone wolf syndrome, if you will. And I am not on this journey alone. I've had incredible mentors, coaches, therapists who have empowered me to take my life back. I moved out here in 2020 from the East Coast because I wanted to live the skier lifestyle. This is where I want to be. And I made it happen. And I had a lot of support and a lot of healing along the way. So that's what I'd like to leave people with. You can heal. You can thrive again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I missed this question. What exactly is thriving according to you? Like,
And we kind of touched on this a little bit. It's about being self-esteem, high self-worth, standing in your truth at that given moment. We are always changing and evolving. So it's a really moment by moment perspective that I look at. And be clear on your boundaries, be clear on your passion, your principles, and your purpose. And when somebody tries to violate your boundaries without anger and without apology, you say no. And you do not negotiate your boundaries and who you are as a woman, or as a person, I should say. Yeah.
awesome. I enjoyed this conversation and I'm truly grateful. I get to learn a lot through this podcast, and I'm sure the audience will learn a lot and it will reflect. I, I believe that everyone will reflect upon their life, and they will think through it, I'm sure. So thank you. I'm truly grateful, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking with you so much, and this has been a great podcast. So thank you.
Thank you.